Now, this list isn't going to be very long. Risk of Rain 2 is an amazing game, and because of that, it does a lot of things right. However, it's not perfect, struggling with a few small things here and there. This list isn't really about that. I've already done a video about things I don't like at all about Risk of Rain 2, so this time I'll be listing out what I'd specifically change about Risk of Rain 2. Things that I don't personally like about the game that aren't really a huge problem, just things I would prefer to be changed and how. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe, as it helps me out a bunch, and I need them to become stronger so I can defeat my enemies in combat. Anyways, be sure to leave your ideas for what you would change in the game down below, and let's get into it. In no particular order, let's start the list off with a more recent issue. The Artifact of Rebirth is a new artifact that is unlike no other. It's the only artifact that you don't unlock via the Artifact Reliquary, and in its uniqueness, is flawed. Picture this. You decide to get your False Sun Huntress skin and begin a run on the Path of the Storm. You complete the Halcyon Beacon and advance through the levels to defeat the False Sun. It's a tough fight, but you make it through. After the dust settles, you're lucky enough to find a 57-leaf clover in the Aurelianite fragment. You place it in the Shrine of Rebirth, excited to play in a new luck-filled run with your new Huntress skin. It starts off great, and you even get a few proccable items. Then, suddenly, the overloading beetle you weren't paying attention to one-shots you during the teleporter fight. Congratulations, you've just effectively wasted the past hour of your life, because guess what? The 57-leaf clover is gone forever. The Artifact of Rebirth is now blank, and your time spent getting it is effectively wasted. I hate this. It's incredibly silly that it is removed on death, as you have to go through the entire False Sun boss fight and Path of the Storm again just to get it back. What's worse is, let's say we rewind the clip and change it up a bit. I'm gonna be honest, gang, I tried to do a rewind effect in editing here for like 3 hours and I cannot figure it out for the life of me. So let's all pretend that there was a really cool rewind effect here. Everyone go comment, hey, really cool rewind effect sucks. That's really cool. Then, suddenly, you have an IRL responsibility. Your boss needs you to come in and help to replace a sick coworker. Your dog is making a weird noise. Your dinner is simply ready. Either way, you quit the game, and guess what? Your item is gone again. This whole system is very silly to me, as no other artifacts demand so much work just to use them. My suggested change is simple. Just make it so that the item stays in the Artifact of Rebirth forever once you place it in, and it can only be changed by beating the False Sun again and replacing it with something else. I'm not sure why it was made this way. I understand that starting your game with a 57-leaf clover is incredibly strong, but most artifacts are, and if you believe that this makes the run too easy, don't use it. Artifacts are supposed to be like arcade-style modifiers to the main game, and in that are inherently unbalanced. I think this change should be implemented immediately, as it was one of the biggest reasons I even decided to make this video. What would be more interesting is if the Shrine of Rebirth allowed you to add multiple items together and customize an entire build for a future run. It would certainly make my life easier. Anyways, let's move on. I honestly didn't think I'd have enough to say for this video, but as I thought about it, there are a few more things that I dislike about the game. And over playing it, I've learned to ignore them. I find the lack of abilities incredibly limiting on most survivors. Even characters like Multi and Captain, I feel like we could just have more. Even if it was only one more ability per ability type per character, I think the customizability would skyrocket. Even if there was a clear favorite, you could still change things up if you wanted to have your runs feel just a little bit different. As it is right now, most people choose one of the 2 to 3 options they have per ability type and just run with that forever, rarely changing it up for any reason. If we ever get another DLC, or let alone recover from this latest one, I hope we get more abilities for existing characters. I would honestly prefer this over getting a new survivor, because as time moves on, it does feel like the original characters are getting forgotten a bit in replacement for the novelty of newer ones. I can't imagine it would even be that hard to implement. Sure, coding and bug fixing combined with making the animations for them might cause some slowdown, but I feel like this is a realistic expectation to get at least some new abilities in the future. There isn't really a solution to this issue other than to just add more, and in the interest of time, I won't be making concepts of any abilities, as I've already done that a while back in a previous video that I'll put in a little card on the top corner. Let's get to the next topic already. One thing I always found a bit concerning about the game is how unwelcoming welcoming it is to play for the first time. In the recent DLC, there was a tutorial added alongside the new inspect button that allows you to learn what a thing does. But I honestly don't know if it's enough. Yeah, you can learn from watching content on the game, and educational YouTube channels certainly help, but in a vacuum, the game is pretty unwelcoming. 207 items to learn and commit to memory, 59 enemies to understand and avoid, with 10 elite variations to learn as well, 31 maps to learn and recognize and path correctly, and countless interactables to try and understand. The point is, there are a ton of things new players have to keep track of and learn, and I know that from an outsider's perspective, this game is much less welcoming than others. Some may say that roguelite games like Risk of Raid 2 are inherently complicated, and I agree, but I feel like as far as roguelikes and lights go, Risk of Rain 2 could absolutely be easier to get into with a more comprehensive tutorial system, making it so that the first time you pick up an item or use an interactable, you could get a pop-up that explains to you what it does, or something like that. Either way, I think some steps could be taken to make the game a little less threatening to start playing. Going back to the smaller things, elite aspects could be a bit better in my opinion. These items are incredibly rare drops from enemies with elite affixes on them that make your character a lot stronger by applying those affixes on you. The thing I want to change is simple. These items take the place of your artifact spot so you can only carry one at a time, and I could not tell you why. Yes, they can make you very powerful, but they are also incredibly rare. Most players will not get one until hundreds of hours into the game. Because of this, I don't see why we can't carry multiple of them. My suggested change is to simply change the rarity to boss or yellow, so that you can carry multiple. The mod Zet Aspects does this on top of making them stackable, which I think is an entirely reasonable change. Like I said, they are incredibly difficult to get naturally, and right now, some of the only items that can be considered god tier, like a super rare weapon from a battle royale. The fact that you can only carry one feels a bit punishing, and on top of that, it removes your ability to carry other equipment items, which can be even more punishing to you in the long run. Sure, Ifrit's distinction may be strong, but the recycler is pretty great too, and I don't see why we can't carry both. On the topic of items, I do want to bring up an issue that I believe I'm not alone in having. Lunar items are a bit weird, and while that's kind of the point, they still cause some issues. The main problem lunar items cause is in Eclipse. Because many of them are incredibly strong, like the Gesture of the Drowned and Transcendence, a lot of Eclipse runs are completely nullified by just visiting the Bazaar Between Time. Eclipse is supposed to be the hardest challenge of the game that they can offer, being incredibly difficult and borderline unachievable for most players. So it doesn't really make any sense as to why you can just completely remove the challenge with some of these items. Transcendence alone counters like 3 of the Eclipse levels, and it's not alone in having a ton of power for no reason. I think the change to this is pretty obvious. Just make the Bazaar Between Time, and by extension maybe even Lunars as a whole, unavailable for the Eclipse game mode. I really don't understand why this hasn't been added yet. I could understand why it wasn't at the beginning, because the developers might not really understand how strong most of the lunar items were, but I feel like it's been enough time that we move on and remove the Bazaar Between Time from the Eclipse already. Another issue I have with the game is the bosses. I know that they are limited by the same 4 ability system that the player is, but I still feel like more could have been done with some of the enemies. Teleporter fights are honestly boring nowadays, as the bosses are incredibly predictable and not really as strong as they should be. The change I have is honestly pretty cool in my opinion, and that is boss variants. One variant for each boss that looks slightly different. A different horn pattern on the Beetle Queen, a different head shape for the Stone Golem, an icosahedron Xi construct, simply a small indication that the boss is different from the original version. On top of this, 2 of these new boss variants' abilities will be replaced with new ones, making them slightly different to fight without being entirely new enemies. These abilities would also be their rarer abilities. Think like the Xi Construct's Shield or the Stone Golem's Sphere attack. The ones that are less common to see, or just only happen once or twice during a fight. This way, the boss would still be relatively the same, just slightly different. This is all that matters to me. I just want to have a regular run be spiced up and varied a little bit from what it is now, because currently, the only way a run is really different from any other is from player-controlled things, like your build or your character. I want want to adapt to the game on top of the game adapting to me, if that makes sense. Speaking of bosses, something small I wish I could change about the gameplay loop of Risk of Rain 2 is the fact that you can't fight every massive boss in the game. We almost can. The most you can currently fight in a single run being 3 with the False Sun, Mithrix, and Voidling in that order, but I think they should let me go the extra mile and fight the special scavenger in a moment whole. I just like the idea of fighting every boss in a single run. This would open the possibility for a fun boss rush challenge or something like that. I think the most obvious way to do this is to add another glass frog after the Voidling fight in the planetarium that brings you to a moment whole. This would allow you to fight every boss in the game in a single run, and I want that a lot. I don't have much else to say about it than that, honestly, so let's just move on. I am already running out of ideas for this video because, again, there aren't many things I'd like to change about this amazing game. Pet peeves are all I really have left, so let's get into that. The new character, Chef, is pretty great, but it's like the developers unintentionally designed a character that completely goes against my playstyle. I am a player who fully prefers abilities that I can just fire and forget. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy metagaming as much as the next person, but when I am playing casually, I far prefer characters that allow me to turn my brain off and just shoot at the bad guys. Chef is not that, being designed completely against this philosophy. In order to get full value out of his kit, you need to use most of your abilities on the enemies in succession and in tandem with each other. Most people enjoy this type of rewarding play, which I get and won't be changing, but the part I do want to change is his primary attack. The Cleaver is now the second primary ability in the game that you cannot just hold down left click to get value out of. The only other instance of this is Captain's Primary, which allows you to charge the ability, so the fact you have to spam the button makes sense. With Chef's, though, you don't really get anything out of it, and there's no real reason that you have to refire the ability to retract the Cleaver back to you. I think it should be changed to be automatic, working like the Samarang does and instantly returning to you after reaching its full range. I would much prefer this, as currently it feels really awkward to try and get the rhythm down to get full value out of it. Another thing I'd like to add to the previous discussion about lunar items is that I kind of dislike the fact that this game has a meta to it. I understand that this isn't a live service game like Overwatch or Rainbow Six is, but I would love a patch here and there to change up the meta. A buff to the awful items and a nerf to the overpowered ones would be very welcome in my eyes. Namely, the items like Transcendence, Sentient Meat Hook, and Polyloot have always and might always be overpowered for the rest of the game's lifespan. I just wish that, in some point in the future, we get some sort of change to the current best and worst items, because, especially for Eclipse runs, it gets kinda boring after a while. And finally, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I want more achievements. As a Dead by Daylight player, I personally love having tons of pointless number-based achievements that slowly tick up on my Steam profile. I am aware that currently, every achievement gives you something in the game after you complete it, whether that be an item, artifact, or otherwise. I am also aware that the developers have stated multiple times before that they wanted each achievement to be, well, achievable for the average player, which is why Eclipse is not a Steam achievement. However, I feel like I would still prefer if, even after you completed all of the achievements on Steam, that there were even more number-based achievements. Things like completing 50 runs, beating the game with no items, beating it with all artifacts, getting 10,000 kills with Artificer. The possibilities are endless, and I would really enjoy it if these were added to the game. Anyways, Risk of Rain 2 is an amazing game, and while I would like these changes to be added, the game is still great, and I want to make it clear that none of these are deal breakers for me. If you enjoyed the video, I urge you to like and subscribe, as it helps me out a bunch and will help me make more videos like these. Be sure to leave your ideas as to what you would change in the comments down below, and let me know what you thought about my changes as well. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel like they do. If you'd like to become a member, you can always visit the link in the description or join via the button down below. And if you do, you can enjoy some extra perks such as a bunch of additional members exclusive videos. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and bye-bye.